I'm a tree hugger, so I really cherish once in a while a segment about stuff that I think we all should care about, like clean water, clean air, pure soil, this kind of thing. And this is a special shout out to California listeners and viewers. And remember, California may be the canary in the coal mine. This is happening elsewhere. In a move that could leave millions of Californians more vulnerable to water pollution and flooding, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, designed to protect the environment. That's the P in EPA. They've announced plans to revise the definition of waters of the United States, WOTUS. The new rule is expected to scale back further the protections provided by the Clean Water Act following the U.S. Supreme Court major EPA decision. Now, if that seems at all complicated, it is a bit, but the bottom line is kind of scary. And with us to explore the bottom line is the perfect guest. Sean Bothwell is the executive director of the California Coastkeeper Alliance. They're leading efforts to protect California's inland and coastal waters since 2018. Sean has focused on issues like desalination, stormwater, trash policy, recycled water, all of this while leading the agency's legislative advocacy in Sacramento. In other words, it's not just protests, it's not just screaming, it's not just tweets, it's actual legislative agenda. How about it for Sean Bothwell, everyone? Hi, Sean.
Hey, Mark. How's it going today?
This sounds alarming to me. And I remember the first Trump administration and that first Trump EPA, if you want to think of it that way, that faced a problem with clean air. And they said, no problem. It was about particulate matter and certain pollutants and poisons that were going into the air, and industry having trouble not exceeding the federal thresholds, what would be allowed in terms of those poisons going into the air. And the EPA and Trump administration, this is the first one, said, no problem, we'll just raise the amount that you can put into the air and all will be fine. Same thing a bit, as I recall, in the first Trump administration with the water. So when you talk about changing various aspects of what's allowed in water, I think back to what is a familiar agenda, as I recall, on the part of the right. Tell us what's going on now.
Yeah, so the definition of what a water of the United States is has been in debate and been fought over for decades. And it really is crucial to the Clean Water Act because it dictates whether you need a Clean Water Act permit or not, whether you are regulated in what you discharge to a water body or not. And so if it's not a water of the United States, that means the Clean Water Act does not protect that waterway. And so this has always been a target for the right to weaken over the years. And we saw it with the Supreme Court case 2 years ago. And now the Trump administration, as you mentioned, is making a rule out of that Supreme Court decision. And so it's essentially the Trump administration's interpretation of that Supreme Court case. So it's only going to get worse. The Supreme Court case was bad enough as it is. We estimate in just California, about 600,000 miles of streams are going to lose Clean Water Act protections. And anywhere from 50 to 93% of our wetlands just in California are going to lose protections just from the Sackett decision, the Supreme Court decision. And
so does that already, Sean, does that mean when you say they lose protections, that means literally there can be dumping, there can be any number of things that might have been, associated with fines and imprisonment and all these other things. Now that can go completely unregulated.
Certainly for the nation, there's a lot of other states that don't have any type of backstop state program. California, we are lucky. We do have a state permitting program, but that permitting program has far less stringent requirements, is pretty cumbersome and almost impossible to enforce. And so you see permittees trying to move to these state permits all the time because they're vague. It's not clear when you're in compliance, when you're not. And so they can hide from that and hide from accountability.
So what is the plan then to deal with this kind of thing? It's an aggressive plan on the part of the administration and the EPA. I mean, the EPA, it's an odd thing, now seems sort of more committed to rolling back these protections in the environment than anything else. Well, what is your plan?
So our plan, our first step is a bill, Senate Bill 601 by Senator Allen down in Los Angeles. And the bill essentially takes Clean Water Act tools and puts them into our state law so that we can treat those waterways that are losing protections. We will treat them just as if they're still under the Clean Water Act here in California. And we're also changing the enforcement standards so that they're standardized between Clean Water Act permits and state permits, so that really what we're trying to prevent is permit shopping. If the standards are the same for a state permit and the enforcement's the same for a state permit, then there's no incentive for folks to even ask to move from a Clean Water Act permit to a state permit. And so that's one of the big things we're trying to achieve, while also just maintaining the environmental standards that we've enjoyed in California for the last 50 years.
I would think, Sean, that in California anyway, you have that kind of legislative support to something like this. Like, this shouldn't be a heavy lift for you.
You would think so. There's a lot of things going on in California.
What does that mean? Industry?
Housing.
Who's pushing back?
Well, politically, the opposition largely is coming from agriculture, but the chambers of commerce are also largely opposed. And honestly, to my frustration, some of the folks with Clean Water Act permits that this bill, quite frankly, doesn't impact at all unless they want lesser permits, they're also opposed. And what I hear from opposition is, it's really big, it's a big bill, it's complicated, and it's about water. So we're just going to oppose it because we don't understand it. And so we're trying to educate opposition of really what we're trying to do is maintain the status quo while the rest of the nation goes backwards. That's our ultimate goal with this bill.
I mean, California, again, does have history in doing just that, right, Sean? I mean, that California can lead the way, tougher environmental regulations, tougher protections for things like water and air here in California than you'll find elsewhere in the nation. And in that sense, we've always, at least I have, seen California in sort of a leadership position when it comes to the environment. But now we seem to be, under real attack. And you're making it sound like it could maybe not be the cakewalk in Sacramento where the bill would have to pass that I might think it would be.
No, it's definitely not. I would say just about every regulated entity is either opposed or concerned about it. There's a lot of folks out there that, quite frankly, want the Trump rollbacks. They want lesser standards, and they won't say it out loud, but that's the reason they're opposing it.
Well, when you say a lot of folks out there who want that, you mean these constituencies associated with the agriculture and industry?
So agriculture, if we write the bill correctly, which we're working with agriculture to do, this bill shouldn't even encroach on agriculture, because agriculture wasn't part of the Clean Water Act. They've been exempt from it. They're not considered what's called a point source, so they're not part of the Clean Water Act. It's the folks that have Clean Water Act permits that are really the ones that see this as a way to lessen their standards. We have something called a 303D list, but essentially it's all of the very polluted waterways in California, and it lists all the sick waterways, and it provides limits on how much you can pollute in order for the waterway to get healthy again. And I think they see that as, they like to see that get rolled back. They like to see those waterways no longer be protected by the Clean Water Act.
So tell us what's at stake here. Remind me what's at stake.
Yeah, so if you can imagine, so the Supreme Court rule essentially said that the waterway needs to be continuously flowing. And you can imagine there's a lot of waterways here in California that don't flow continuously, relatively permanently all year long. There's a lot of seasonal streams. I mean, there's major rivers that sometimes don't have water in them for parts of the year. And that doesn't mean that if someone were to discharge trash or bacteria or, toxic metals, that stuff's eventually going to get to the coast and where we swim. It's going to get into our drinking water and make it more expensive to treat drinking water. It's, going to lead to more polluted fish and marine life. All this stuff ultimately ends up, flowing downhill to the coast where we swim, where we fish, where a lot of major cities are. And so that's the impact, that these waterways are not going to have the same accountability under the Clean Water Act that they used to have.
So the pollutants and the wave of pollution makes its way, it starts in the wetlands, or it starts in one area, and it makes its way through all of these different spaces that you're talking about.
Certainly. Eventually, let's just take the Santa Ana River. There's portions of it that don't flow all year long. But eventually it's going, if you dump a ton of trash in the Santa Ana River, sometime in the winter, it's going to fill up, and that trash is going to make its way out to the ocean, and we're going to end up swimming in it.
What can we do as voters and listeners and viewers to what we've just been talking about? What can we do to help keep these waterways cleaner?
I mean, the most important thing, this bill, Senate Bill 601, right now it's in the Senate, so certainly calling senators is the most helpful thing we can do right now, and it will be in the Assembly, hopefully, starting this summer. And the Assembly can be a little more moderate, so it's an uphill battle. Letters to the governor are certainly helpful. This is a controversial bill, and hopefully Governor Newsom sees this as us taking a leadership role against the Trump rollbacks. But there's a lot of political interests that don't like the bill. So calling state senators, assembly members are key right now.
It makes me smile that you say it's a controversial bill. The controversy, that's why I keep pressing you on exactly what constituencies are fighting back against you, because it seems so basic to life in California that you'd want the cleanest possible water. This is where regulations, I'm always reminding people, they really mean protections for the environment, for consumers, et cetera, but particularly when the environment's concerned. And I understand we can overprotect or overregulate, but wow, I almost think you can't overregulate protections when it comes to water, air, and soil.
Yeah, I actually, again, we're just trying to maintain the status quo here in California. And that kind of pains me, to be perfectly honest. I would love to be out there, running legislation to, improve our protections. But at this point, with the rest of the nation going backwards, that's the best we can do. That's what we're hoping for. And so, yeah, it is frustrating. There are some folks out there that, are working with us to try to make sure that the language is very precise. Because it's water in California, and everyone fights over water, and so it can be controversial regardless of us just simply trying to maintain the status quo.
So again, it's Assembly Bill 601. Is that what you said?
It's Senate Bill 601. Yeah, by Senator Al.
Senate Bill 601. And just so people don't make the same mistake I just made, we'll actually have it in the description for those who are listening and want to make that call. And what is the timetable on votes and on this legislation?
So right now the bill is going to Senate Judiciary. Senator Umberg from Orange County is the chair. So anyone from Orange County, call his local district would be incredibly helpful right now. We're somewhat optimistic though that we're going to be okay in that committee, but it would help. It's been a tough committee in the past, and then it'll go to the Senate floor probably towards the end of May. So yeah, calling senators by the end of May is incredibly helpful. And then from June to August, it will be in the Assembly. And then it'll hopefully, if everything goes right, we'll end up at the governor's desk sometime in September.
That's soon. I mean, the end of May is soon. So, gosh, Sean, I wish you the best with this. Stay in touch. Let us know what's happening. And to the degree that we can, energize our audience and be part of any good effort in this regard, it would really be, it would be our pleasure. And it's very important. So, again, thanks again for all the good work you do.
Thank you. Really appreciate the time.
Sean Bothwell, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.